Welcome back. Today we're looking at a political commentary video, one that's analyzing the author calls the woke white woman mind virus. It's got a really strong core idea, but we found 3 key ways to, I think, really maximize its impact. So let's just dive right in. Our first point is about the pacing, really, and how the flow keeps getting disrupted, which undermines the whole political argument.
Yeah, that's a huge one. I mean, the material's coherence is it's really diminished by putting these long, unrelated personal updates and, these big commercial bits right in the middle of a very serious analysis.
It's severe fragmentation. You're talking about, say, a potential civil war or geopolitical stuff like Venezuela or the Iran protests. And then, bam, you're hearing a rundown of someone packing tea orders.
Right. And the gravity of what's being discussed, it needs uninterrupted focus. You're building this case, for instance, with the Renee Good ice shooting analysis, and then all that momentum is just gone.
And the examples are so specific. I mean, there's a long apology for being gone for 2 weeks to pack tea, the promo for the seasonal blend, and then the big one, the Beam sponsorship.
Oh, the hot chocolate.
Yeah.
Yeah, hearing about putting milk in the bad boy, using the frother, waiting for it to kick in, it's just so jarring.
It's a total intellectual circuit breaker. If you're leaning in, trying to understand this complex idea about supporting dictators abroad while fighting perceived oppression at home, a minute and a half on how to make hot chocolate is a complete gear shift.
So what's the actual fix here? I mean, these parts, the personal stuff and the ads, they aren't going away. You have to have them. Well, the suggestion has to be about separation, a clear, deliberate separation between the editorial content and everything else. If the goal is to keep that political intensity, then all the non-essential stuff has to be moved or, really condensed. It's about compartmentalizing.
So instead of just dropping it in the middle of a thought, you treat the sponsorship like its own thing. A clearly signaled segment.
Exact. Think of it like Chapter 1 is the analysis, and Chapter 2 is a full-on commercial break. You could even use like a musical sting or something. And you move all that detailed description, the whole ritual with the frother, completely out of the main track.
That way, the listener knows what's happening. They know when the analysis is paused and when it's coming back.
Yes, and it signals respect for their attention. A sudden pivot to tea logistics kind of suggests the political crisis is maybe less urgent than the seasonal blend.
And that's not the message you want to send.
Not at all. And you do the same with personal update. The tea packing thing, that can be a single sentence. We were swamped, but we're back. Done. Anything more feels like a mismatch in priority.
That makes the whole thing feel much more professional, much more serious. Okay, I like that. So let's move on to our second point. This one is more about the structural integrity of the argument itself. It's about strengthening the thesis by front-loading the psychological context.
Yeah, and this is, I think, maybe the most critical opportunity in the whole piece. To really maximize the power of the argument, you have to introduce the core psychological ideas early on. So they frame the example instead of just appearing at the end like an afterthought.
And the core thesis is very strong. I mean, the argument that this behavior is driven by things like misguided radicalization, entitlement, and especially this idea of tying identity and emotions to politics.
But the structure completely buries the lead. That whole theoretical framework, it only shows up after you've already seen the most shocking example. So the audience is watching this behavior, like women supporting Hamas or defending criminals, and they're doing it without the lens to understand why.
Okay, but is there a risk there? If you present all the theory up front, does it start to feel, like a lecture instead of an investigation?
That's a fair point, but I'd argue the psychological framework here isn't just background, it's the decoder ring. Without it, the examples just look like random, inexplicable hypocrisy. The listener is thinking, that's insane, but what's going on?
Okay.
If you give them the theory first, then every example that follows becomes immediate, compelling evidence. The theory turns an observation into a proper analysis.
So the suggestion is to restructure the material, to put those root causes of the mind virus right up top. That way, the examples become proof, not just observation.
Precisely. And let's get specific. You could introduce the idea of tying identity to politics and that whole backfire effect right after the opening recap. Then you use that theory to set up what's coming.
Okay, so let's take that really intense example from the material about leftists defending migrants who are evading ICE, even when they know ICE is targeting them for truly heinous crimes.
Like murder or sexual assault.
Right. So how would that work differently?
Well, in the current structure, it's just a baffling contradiction. But in the new structure, The author can say, look, if your entire moral identity is based on this good list of things, support migrants, oppose ICE, then any contradictory fact, no matter how awful, has to be ignored to protect your sense of self.
So the facts of the crime become secondary to the ideology?
Exactly. The ideological binary overrides the evidence, and that shift elevates the entire piece. You're not just documenting a bizarre outcome, you're showing the mechanical failure of the ideology in real time.
That's a much more robust argument.
And it's a much harder argument for an opponent to just dismiss. You're not just calling them hypocrites. You're saying, here is the predictable internal mechanism that forces this contradiction.
And that idea of tying your identity to politics, it really explains why it's so hard for people to absorb information that proves them wrong. It feels like a personal attack.
That's why you have to front-load it. By the time the listener gets to the most extreme examples, they already have the tools you've given them to decode it. They see it as a defense mechanism, not just random lunacy. You show them the blueprint of the virus before you show them the symptoms.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, so on to our third and final critique, which is about tone. Specifically, an inconsistent tone that I think dilutes the material's analytical authority.
Yeah, the piece swings back and forth too often between really insightful, sharp observations and then this highly generalized or emotionally charged rhetoric. And that's a problem because it undermines the author's credibility as a serious critic.
You're right. The author is actually really good at breaking down complex things like TikTok echo chambers or why it's so hard to accept you're wrong. The analytical voice is definitely there, and it's sharp.
But then those moments of clarity get followed by, an outburst. For instance, there's a moment of what feels like real empathy for women who think the government is gunning people down, but it's immediately followed by saying they should go see a priest and get an exorcism.
Or statements like, I will not forgive ever. It just makes it hard to know what the intent is. Is this a serious diagnosis, or is it just venting?
And the cost of that is authority. When the author uses phrases like, this is not the behavior of a mentally well person, or calls it all of this lunacy, it just gives the opposition an easy way out. They can dismiss the whole thing as an emotional attack instead of engaging with the facts.
So the suggestion has to be to commit to that analytical, intellectually curious voice and maintain it rigorously.
Absolutely. The author needs to fully step into the role of a dispassionate political diagnostician. When you challenge your opponent's views, frame it constructively. It should come from a place of curiosity, not judgment.
So let's model that. Instead of saying something dismissive that sounds like venting, what does that more analytical voice sound like?
Well, instead of saying this isn't the behavior of a mentally well person, you could try something like, I wonder, though, if we've considered the psychological cost of tying one's entire moral framework to such an unstable platform. You're still making the critique, but it's grounded in intellectual rigor.
Okay, so let's apply that to the example of the women thinking about tattooing Renee Nicole Goods' name. The author makes a brilliant point there about the contradiction, the No Kings rallies last summer versus supporting oppressive regimes now. That's the core.
That contradiction is the point. That's what needs to be maximized, not buried under an instruction to stop it, get some help. The author should focus entirely on why. Why does this weird binary thinking lead to ignoring real oppression in places like Venezuela and Iran?
Because they're ignoring actual global oppression to protect an internal U.S. political narrative.
Yes, and the critique has so much more authority when it focuses on the why of that contradiction. The analysis is strong enough on its own. It doesn't need to resort to judging the mental stability of the people involved.
It allows the listener to draw their own conclusions about that, based on the evidence presented, rather than being told what to think through ridicule. That's way more persuasive.
It's a strategic choice, really. Taking the high ground with your rhetoric makes it harder for critics to attack you. By staying analytical and focused on the contradictions, the author makes the work very difficult to dismiss. It elevates it from commentary into a powerful analysis.
So we've covered how to really tighten and elevate this commentary by focusing on structure and tone.
Yeah, and the source material is great. It's full of compelling examples and has a fascinating core idea. These changes are really about presentation, making sure the structure and delivery truly serve the quality of the content.
So, to quickly summarize, first, manage the pacing by creating hard, clearly defined segments for commercials and personal updates. Don't let logistics interrupt the urgency of the political discussion.
Strengthen the entire argument by moving that psychological framework right to the front. You give the audience the key to understanding everything before they see the evidence.
And finally, maintain a consistent analytical tone to build authority. The material is at its best when it's dissecting contradictions, not when it veers into dismissive or emotional rhetoric. Commit to being the diagnostician.
Exactly. Focus on the why, structure the content to front-load the theory, and maintain that high-ground rhetoric. Those steps will turn this into a truly robust, persuasive analysis that really demands to be taken seriously.
We invite the listener to refine the material based on this critique and to submit the revised version. We would love to explore the success of these adjustments in a follow-up. Until next